All right, while we're waiting to start, thank you and welcome everybody to the OpenSSF Town Hall. We'll get rolling in just a minute here, but while we're waiting for everyone to join, please take a moment to do one or more of the following. Feel free to use the Q&A section here in Zoom to ask questions. We will hold questions until the end, just so we can get through everybody's presentations quickly enough, and aim to leave 10, hopefully 15 minutes at the end for questions. Please consider following us on Twitter, of course, Mastodon, which is where everyone is moving to, it seems, as well as on LinkedIn at the OpenSSF. We will distribute these slides as well in fact, they might already be up on the public website. So feel free to pull these down, follow these links. As well as, of course, to the main OpenSSF website. And finally, we've got a lot of great training materials. So for any of you who are new to either the organization or to our technologies, new to thinking about security and open source software, please take a look at the training courses that we have put up and made available. This meeting is being recorded, and why don't we just jump in. As with every meeting of the Linux Foundation, we just want to make you aware of the antitrust policy notice that we have here. This keeps us all on solid legal ground as we work together and collaborate on building the technologies that everyone depends upon. We also, of course, are guided by the OpenSSF and Linux Foundation codes of conduct. We are dedicated to providing a harassment-free experience here for participants at all of our events, in person or virtual, and we expect everyone to be in accordance with professional standards. So definitely appreciate all of you learning more about these at the links provided in the deck. As I mentioned, feel free to use the Q&A button to submit questions, and we will answer them as we can, if not in real time, then towards the very end. Thank you very much for that. We have a chock-full agenda today. This is our first town hall since August. Apologies for being a little bit quiet over the last few months, but I will give, for any of you who are new to the OpenSSF, kind of a quick top-level tour of who we are, what we're working on, what some of the interesting announcements have been since August. But I really want to make sure that we can pass the baton quickly to our other four speakers to just cover go into depth on a number of interesting projects here at the OpenSSF, as well as guidance on how all of you can get involved in one way or another. So let me dive in to this. This is really just an opening. I myself am your general manager at the OpenSSF. I've been on the project for nearly a year and a half now, and it's been a thrilling experience. It's kind of like a fire hose. There's so much going on across the community every day. It's really just an honor to be able to be here. The OpenSSF's purpose is to enable the open source community to collaborate and drive technical innovations around improving the state of security across open source software and the software supply chain. We are a collection of initiatives organized by working groups, and within those, some of those initiatives are software development projects, but some of them are also other kinds of projects, developing other kinds of content, be they specifications, be they educational materials. In some cases, we're setting up services as well. There's a whole lot here, and it's beyond just open source software. And again, it's a really thriving, vibrant, very circus-like community at times. At the top level, and this is how we are organized, there is a governing board comprised of our supporting founders who kind of help make sure that the lights stay on, that the team is, myself and the staff that work for me are delivering and supporting the organization every way possible. And we've got a few committees off to the side. But the real heart of OpenSSF is the working groups, the projects, and the technical advisory council that tie them all together. I'll go into depth in some of those in a bit. I do want to note, of course, that the OpenSSF is supported by a very broad set of both premier members. These are the organizations that have made a major commitment, both in the form of some cash to help fund our operations, as well as full-time engineers working on different projects. We're very grateful to them all, and really believe, we've pulled together the core set of organizations that can help push forward better security and open source software. We're also further supported by a very amazing set of general and associate members. General members are those who are a range of companies, small, medium, and large, who also believe in our mission. And associate members are other nonprofits, educational organizations, in some cases regulatory organizations who also are aligned with our mission and also are here to learn and participate and help us really grow beyond what we as a single organization could do. So we're very grateful for their participation. In fact, the sum total of these organizations recently crossed 100, which is a landmark for any type of organization of ours. It represents a scale across not just the cloud ecosystem and the security ecosystem, but into various sectors like finance and others. And we're really grateful again for all of them to be supporting our work here. In fact, we just recently welcomed a bunch of new members, and I'm really most excited to see the new associate members, the Open Source Business Alliance and the Python Software Foundation, with whom we've some really deep engagements in trying to work together to improve the state of security in the Python ecosystem. But thank you to our new general members as well. If your organization believes in what we do and would consider becoming a member, we would love to talk with them. Please have, please reach out by emailing us at membership@openssf.org. And there's lots of ways to get involved with this, and in particular, the kind of organizational support that helps us wake up every day thinking about ways to better support the community. And I also want to emphasize that, like any open source project, what really matters are the people who show up to help do the work. We have a tremendous governing board who really helped us align what we're doing with their company's initiatives, with the broader state of the ecosystem out there. They are all major players within their own organizations as individuals, but it's really when they come together on our monthly calls or supporting the different committees that we do, but also really driving the kind of personnel investment and the adoption of these technologies into their own organizations where they really shine and help us. And I'm deeply appreciative of each and one of them who are participating. The OpenSSF Technical Advisory Council is really the technical community, the technical council most focused on harmonizing our technical efforts at the OpenSSF, kind of loosely coordinating, loosely overseeing, but really at the end of the day, helping make sure that everything we do from a technology point of view meets a high bar for quality and professionalism. We are actually about to kick off elections for the next Technical Advisory Council, and so we'll see some changes in this roster, and I'm grateful for each one of them who have been able to put forth a huge amount of work over the last year, helping get us to where we are today. There is a core OpenSSF staff here that is supporting us both, obviously here worldwide, as well as specifically in the Asia Pacific region, and it's we are the air traffic controllers. We're the behind-the-scenes orchestrators. We are not the ones who fly the planes. That's all of you and all of our members. But so much of what makes this project work is due to their help. So I'm very grateful for my co-staff to really make it fly. So let me cover some of the major announcements that have hit since the last time we met here at a town hall. Back in October, we announced the general availability of SigStore. SigStore, as hopefully all of you know, is a platform for signing digital artifacts in the software supply chain and verifying those signatures in a way that provides greater integrity to the distribution of software in a world where we're working together on source code, but so often we're actually distributing and combining binary code. You really want to know that it comes from the source that you think it comes from, and SigStore is a key part of that. And it's been great to see the adoption of this by the cloud native community and by other organizations, open source organizations pushing it forward. We also have published updates to the concise guides for developing more secure software and evaluating open source software. I'd say if you're an open source developer and you want to start with one checklist of both how to evaluate code that you're considering adopting as a dependency, and then what you as an open source developer and your other co-maintainers should do to make your project more secure and make sure people understand that you're taking these extra steps to make them more secure. These two concise guides are perhaps the best place to start. And all of them have links to both of them have links to lots of other details that really flesh things out, but it's a great checklist to get started with if you're developing or consuming open source code. With a little more depth into something specific, the Best Practices Working Group has developed something called the Guide for Coordinated Vulnerability Disclosure. As we've found, sometimes bugs get found, security bugs get found and released to the wild in a way that creates a lot of disruption for users of that software and their downstream users and the downstream users. And coordinating a major disclosure is a challenge, and it's not something that they teach at computer science courses in colleges, or that many of us pick up as we're starting our computer science educational journey. So this is something that we would love to see open source developers, particularly maintainers, particularly leaders in open source organizations, pick up, understand, perhaps even read ahead of time before the next major bug pops up, that they have to, in a very short amount of time, scramble and figure out the right way to coordinate that process. Likewise, many of you are perhaps familiar with this course that we've developed called Developing Secure Software. We've now been engaging in translation efforts, the first of which is a translation into Japanese, which is just like the English language course, available for free, as well as certifications around that. So we do see extending this into other major languages, just because English is not a language we can assume is universal, and really happy to see this happen. Also, since August, one of the major new projects to come in to the OpenSSF is something called the Secure Supply Chain Consumption Framework. The S2C2F is a framework for organizations that do software development and when they take in a dependency on open source software, how do you manage that dependency? How do you manage updates to it? How do you have basically a process for making sure that you are able to close up issues and for your upstreams and your downstreams communicate that appropriately. That's what S2C2F is all about, and it nicely complements the SALSA specification, which is very close to a stable release, and we're really excited about that too. So it's a very complementary framework to that. And just like with SALSA, you'll see both specification work and supporting it in software being built inside of the OpenSSF. Both of these actually are efforts of the Supply Chain Integrity Working Group, which I highly recommend folks follow. We've also started to publish some content on the OpenSSF blog that's a little more high level, a little more intended to reach a broader audience. We felt at the anniversary of the Log4Shell event, Log4Shell disclosure, that it was worth noting what had happened since then, how the industry had moved on from that, what some of the lessons were, but also some of the changes that we've seen and that we ourselves have been pushing for ever since that event. And so that's a blog post we'd certainly encourage you to go check out and read. We also have started to play quite a role in public policy relating to securing of software. It turns out a whole lot of governments are starting to ask questions about how are we managing security? How are we trying to sew things up now that open source software is being depended upon for critical infrastructure? We have an internal committee called the Public Policy Committee that talks about these changes that are happening externally and how we might want to address them publicly. But one of the things we did was put out a public statement about an act that was proposed in the last Congress called the Securing Open Source Software Act that has started to incorporate many of these both technologies and ideas that we've been talking about, others have been talking about, that we believe could lead to more secure software by default. So it's fascinating to see both the executive side and the legislative side in the States, in Europe, in the Asia Pacific region, in many other places, start to wake up to the roles that they can play in both setting some new standards and demands, but also hopefully providing resources for that. So we're really hoping to encourage that. In fact, that was the broader message of another blog post we made on engaging policymakers and the ecosystem on open source software globally. My LinkedIn title says Nerd Diplomat, and I'm finding that is starting to be much more relevant even to the public policy side, where simply going out and talking about what we're doing, the technologies we're building, the processes we're working on specifying, but also the relevancy of that to everybody's interest in seeing more dependable, secure, critical infrastructure. Just that continues to be super important, even a year after Log4Shell, even as we go into 2023. Back to the OpenSSF, one of the major new working groups. In fact, the last working group that was created, the most recent working group that was created, and this is new since August, is the OpenSSF End Users Working Group. This is actually convened by a number of participants at Citigroup, at a number of other financial organizations, and some of the folks who serve that industry. But it's not exclusive to finance by any means. What it's intended to do is to say, from the perspective of people who are not cloud providers, who are not tools makers, but who are consuming this technology and who are having to put it to work in critical infrastructure, what are the technologies we should be building? What are the kinds of dashboards we should be building? The kinds of processes we should be promoting that make them participants in this entire thing. So that's what the End Users Working Group is focused on. They've already been working on some technologies relating to pulling these different pieces together into a unified secure software factory. In fact, a project called Fresca is underneath that working group, and it's a really exciting way to frame a lot of the work that we're doing. Back to something more nitty gritty. We've jumped in, as many of you are familiar, we have a project called the Security Scorecards, which has gone from strength to strength, based on the success of the API-driven kind of display of the OpenSSF best practices badges. We felt it would be useful to also display badges derived from project scorecards, scores, that from the million different repositories that we've analyzed. So those scorecard badges are now able to be shown inside of GitHub and in other relevant places with a pretty easy link. And a lot of the work from the OpenSSF was put together and summarized at the end of last year into the 2022 annual report. It would be really, if there's one thing that you want to read or pass off to your manager or to somebody else to help them understand the breadth of work that we do here at the OpenSSF, the annual report is really a great way to get that all in one place. We've had a number of face-to-face events as well over the last year. OpenSSF Days have been the predominant kind of vehicle for this, and we've done that both here in the United States back in last May, but also since August in Japan, in Europe, and as well as meetups just earlier this month in Tokyo and in Hong Kong late last month. We also had a booth and participated quite a bit as a sponsor at the Cloud Native Security Con in Seattle a few weeks ago. All of this is about getting out there, pulling together a community, showing our faces to each other, talking about the tech, but also building a sense of codependence and community so that we can move forward on some important projects. And in that vein, the one upcoming thing I want to put in front of you is that OpenSSF Day is coming up May 10th. We still have a CFP open for this for one more day. The deadline is tomorrow to submit a talk for that. We hope whether you submit a talk or not, all of you consider joining us there. It is happening concurrent to the Open Source Security Summit North America, which is another great reason to attend. So come for both events, come for one or the other, but it'd be great to see you there in person. And with that, I'd like to pass the baton to Michael Scavetta. Michael?
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Next slide. So hi, everybody. I'm Mike Scavetta. I co-lead the Alpha Omega project, as well as the Identifying Security Threats Working Group. I've been with OpenSSF since the inception, and I've been at Microsoft for about 10 years, where I lead an open source security team. Next slide. So Alpha Omega is a project within OpenSSF. Our goal really is to, the slogan we've been using is turning money into security. So we are funded with grants from Microsoft, Google, and AWS, and we're extremely thankful for that. And we've been able to take that money and put it toward improving the security of the very most critical open source projects and ecosystems, as well as looking for vulnerabilities in a slightly longer tail of critical projects, just not in the top 100. So we've also published an annual report at the end of last year. Please go read it. It goes into lots of details about what we do and why we do it. I'm told I have the wrong mic selected. Thank you. I'm not sure. It looks like the right mic. maybe I'll just move closer to the mic. Anyway, so super happy to have Jonathan Leicha and Yasini Yesser, who joined the team at the end and the beginning of the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. Also super thankful for my co-lead Bob Calloway from Google and Brian Russell also from Google in helping move this initiative forward and making great things happen. Next slide. So the next, so for Alpha, as I said, we've awarded about $2.5 million in grants. We have another million or so earmarked, and these are currently spread out over 5 organizations. So Node, jQuery, Eclipse, Rust, and Python Software Foundation. We chose these, number one, because these are extremely critical, ubiquitous, structural ecosystems and tools and platforms, and it's really important that these things are safe, because these are the things that people build things on top of. The next couple slides are just as I'm not going to read them, but please read them when you look at the slides later or tonight. But what I think impresses me most about how Alpha works is, we work very closely with these organizations to come up with a directional strategy on the types of things that we all want to see happen from a security perspective. And then we get out of the way and we let the organizations choose how best to implement and how best to go chase those things. We've been really happy with, if you go to the next slide, there have been a number of individuals that have been hired into these organizations. A lot of cleanup. Here, the security improvements in the jQuery server fleet. Next slide. Eclipse is doing security audits of Jetty, JCube, and Mosquito. They've hired 3 people to take on security work within the Eclipse Foundation. Next slide. Rust is doing some excellent work, including hiring a security engineer and a GitHub security scanning partnership where they're integrating as a secret scanning integrator. Next slide. And Python Software Foundation is hiring a security developer in residence as well. So next slide. So the point of all that is that we found that while money doesn't solve all problems, some problems can be solved with appropriate funding, and I think the open source ecosystem is one of those that has been for a long time neglected from a serious funding perspective. I'm super thankful and appreciative to everybody involved that we're able to move the needle here. So that's all on the Alpha side. The Omega side, oops, sorry, back one. The Omega side is about tools and automated analysis, at scale scanning. So we've built some tools. All of these tools are open source and available now, including tools that orchestrate lots of different static analysis tools, a portal for which is still in development, but a portal for triaging and managing lots and lots of security findings, assurance assertions to give to essentially measure and then apply policy to the security quality of open source, which is different than metadata, like is it maintained or does it have publicly known CVEs. Assurance assertions is more like, when we scanned it with a static analysis tool, did it find SQL injection? Things like that. And then we're doing other integrations to more rapidly and efficiently report vulnerabilities at scale and get them fixed. Because no matter how many people we have involved and how much money we can apply to this, the scale of the open source ecosystem is immense, and we have to do things efficiently. Next slide. So coming soon, we are planning to do more alpha engagements, more tools. We're advancing all of these every day. We have been speaking at conferences. We're going to continue to do that. We have a mentorship program that will be announced pretty soon. We are looking at partnering with some universities on how to, essentially help students kind of build the next generation of security researchers, and with a focus on open source security, and a automated vulnerability fix campaign, so that with ideally the push of a button, we can get fixes out to thousands or tens of thousands of projects for these ubiquitous vulnerabilities that we find. We've also been helping out in the vulnerability management space, helping to advance disclosure policy and process, so that when we find vulnerabilities, how can we report them? Like we have to write down what we're going to do so that we can repeat it and do it reliably. And how does that work with automated vulnerability reporting? Next slide. Oh, we're also going to have some swag at some point, so stay tuned. If you want to get involved, there's a public meeting on it's the first Wednesday of every month, so the next one is April 5th. Come help us improve our tools. All of our tools are on GitHub public. Get involved. Come chat with us on Slack. We're super friendly. We're on the Alpha Omega Slack channel. Next slide. I think that's it. Back to you all.
Great, thank you. And Josh, I believe this is you, right?
That's me. You can go to the next slide. All right, awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Bressers. I'm the Vice President of Security at a company called Anchor. We are the people behind the Sift and Gripe scanners you may have heard of, but I've kind of been around security forever. So I'm not, if you want to know more, just search Google or something. So let's jump right into it, Brian. All right, so I lead the SBOM Everywhere group with Kate Stewart, who many of you may know from SPDX fame. And this group has its roots from the mobilization plan from the SSF, which I know is, I mean, man, that's been, what, it's more than a year now, I think. But basically what the purpose of the group is to start to answer the questions of how do we take some of the ideas and usage of SBOMs and bring it into the open source universe, which to date, I think SBOMs have been very government and regulated industry focused, but there's definitely, I think, some interest in how we can be more engaged with open source. And so that's kind of one of the goals for this group. We obviously want to bring SBOMs to everyone, but obviously the open source focus being the OpenSSF is kind of a big part of that. So let's jump to the next slide and we'll kind of talk about some of the things we're doing. So these are the, I guess, work in progress at the moment. Some of this is farther along than others, but obviously anytime you start a group like this, there's a certain amount of like, why are you here? And that always sounds silly every time I start a new group or work with a new group. But it's really important because you have to define your scope and make sure you're not off in left field doing who knows what. That doesn't matter. So kind of the things we list here are what we're really trying to focus on is we want to work with projects. It's very easy to not invent it here. Anytime you create a new project or group or anything like that. And there's a lot going on in SBOM. I tell people that every time we have an SBOM Everywhere meeting, I learn about some new group or effort or project or something going on in the SBOM world that I didn't know about. I thought I knew a lot of this stuff, and it is very clear I do not. So the first big focus is that we want to work with groups. We don't want to replace groups. We don't have any intention of doing it ourselves if someone else is working on it. We want to be the connections between two other groups that maybe aren't talking today. And I'm going to skip the next one and go to there's the landscape is kind of our vision of how we want to do that. And so if you've ever looked, the CNCF has this really cool tool they call the landscape, and just search for it on Google and take a look at it. And it's a really nice way to visualize an enormous number of projects and how they interact in the CNCF universe. And we would like to do something similar with SBOM. And the purpose of that is to help groups and projects and people find one another and understand exactly what's going on. And so we're putting together a proposal for that. Again, this is kind of like back to Michael's concept of, how can we turn money into security? Well, we want to turn money into SBOMs in this case. So we're looking to get that funded at some point in the near future. I'm going to jump back up. Then there's the SPDX Python library. one of the things we did early on was because Kate Stewart's involved, she said, we have this SPDX Python library, it needs some love and attention. It would be lovely if we could have the OpenSSF fund that. And I'm super proud of this project because this is an instance where the OpenSSF took some of their funds and they sent them into another project. Like, excuse me, the SPDX work is not happening inside the OpenSSF. So I think this is very forward thinking, and it really impressed me that there wasn't even a second thought about it. Like, yep, this is a project that needs some funding to get some work done. We're absolutely on board with this, which is awesome. And then the last thing on the list is what we're calling connecting resources to open source. And what we mean by this is it is very common when you're part of a working group to have someone show up and say, I want to help. And then sometimes you have things they can do, sometimes you don't. It can be frustrating. There's this huge gamut of what it can be. And so what we really want to do is find people interested and willing to help open source projects start on their SBOM journey. And this isn't an instance where we're going to try to turn money into security, but rather this is an instance where we want to send people in to do the work. Because there's no way we can show up to an open source project and say, oh, hey, you should do SBOMs. They're going to be like, oh, hey, no, we shouldn't, go away. And so this one we're working on its early days, but I'm extremely hopeful because I think there's a lot of people in SBOM everywhere that are saying, like, I have folks who want to help. What can they do? And we also don't want to just like send people out into the world with no direction or purpose, because that isn't going to be good for anybody. And jump to the next one, Brian. And then this is just kind of the group, right? This is where we are. We meet every other Tuesday. 11:05 is not a typo. We start 5 minutes early. We end 5 minutes early on the hours because we all have bio breaks and too many meetings as it is. Next meeting, March 28th, join us. Everyone's welcome. We'd love to talk to you. We've got a great group of people. We've got a bunch of cool ideas. We've been working hard. It's not a lot of hands-on at the moment, but we're definitely a lot of planning. So by all means, and jump in Slack if you want. So yeah, thank you everyone. If anyone has questions or anything, find me on Slack or ask them here. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And turning now to Christine and Jay, right? Would be leading the conversation on diversity and inclusivity in the OpenSSF.
All right, so thanks, Brian. And so quickly, my name is Christine, and I lead the open source program office at F5. I've been sitting in on OpenSSF meetings for a little over a year, primarily in the best practices working group. Next slide.
Hi, and I'm Jay. I am a member of the open source strategy ecosystem team at Microsoft. I co-lead the DE&I education SIG with Christine. I co-lead the risk dashboard SIG under the identifying security threats working group. Coming in as a co-vice chair of the supply chain integrity working group, and I co-lead the S2C2F SIG under the supply chain integrity working group. Yeah, happy to be here.
All right. Yes, next slide. So just to kind of give you a quick, just like Josh said, the why are we here is that's a good question. And to just the history behind this is that one of the mobilization plans, stream 1, was around security education. And so, and this was then adopted by the developer best practices working group. And the goal for this thing that wanted to adopt it is because there is traditionally cybersecurity is not something that good cybersecurity hygiene or even just good security practices is not something that has been paid attention to. In addition to that, there is a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. So we wanted to adopt this stream to basically put that into motion. And so the first part of that is there were like 3 streams were created out of that to tackle this problem in different areas. One included just curating and seeing what was out there. The second was related to expanding the content based on the findings from the curation process. And there was a third around how do you reward and incentivize developers who either go through the training or what kind of certifications should be there. And part of that was also like, how can you get meaningful employment? So this education SIG plan was put together, refined and reviewed and formalized. And as we were going through that process, we noticed that there were some gaps related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, some parts of the plan that needed a little bit more fleshing out. So that's where Jay and I kind of like put our hand out and said, we would like to form something that would specifically be tackling these. And some of the initial goals that we thought about is like, how can we look at the education materials and make them more accessible specifically to underrepresented groups? So as we're looking at curating the content or even looking at expanding the training, what did we need to pay attention to? Additionally, we were looking at seeing, well, how can we ensure that the pathways to success were made available to the same underrepresented groups? And what are some of like the barriers that seem to be there, whether traditionally in software or even like specifically in cybersecurity? And we find that this actually aligns really well with, if you look at the US cybersecurity strategy that was released, I think about a couple of weeks ago. There's a section 4.6 that you can read out here, and it's looking at we need to take a comprehensive and a coordinated approach, and how we want to expand cyber workforce needs to look at improving diversity and making sure that the educational and the training pathways and the paths to success are in place. And so this that really aligns with the why we are doing what we are doing. And there's the small group that's been meeting regularly. The group started meeting regularly December last year. And we've been talking about like, what are the different things that we need to do? And there are folks from different backgrounds spanning, whether it's education or the folks who are specifically looking at targeting some of the communities that we want to reach. So that's basically who we are and why we're doing this. So I'll hand it over to Jay. Next slide.
Thank you, Christine. So in order to do this effectively, right, we wanted to identify really a few focus areas that we wanted to hone in on. And you'll see those focus areas off to the left-hand part of the slide, where we really want to target in advocacy and communication as a first one. So what kind of stewards are we going to be in this space, and how are we going to communicate that out to the community at large? And we really want to understand those things. And then research and thought leadership. What's already out there? What's already out there? What are some of the great things that a lot of organizations have already done? And what are a lot of the thoughts out there around DE&I, including how to be better allies in respective cultures and spaces? Partnership development. Who can we partner with? What organizations are doing some of this great work out there that we can lean on? How do we reach up into the LF and reach across to other communities and organizations under the LF and see what kind of efforts they have going on and whether or not we can collaborate? And then of course, training and engagement. What kind of training is currently out there, and how can we better orchestrate ourselves to meet some of that demand? And then of course, as we march over into the education element, down into the schools and into the different educational institutions where we have those underrepresented communities or those underrepresented voices that we can target and provide those kind of resources to. Well, that leads us into the right side, where we talk about some of the things that we've done thus far. So we've aligned ourselves around the groups that we want to target. Now, this is important. And this is important because we didn't just look domestically with this. And I think that's something that's extremely important. We took a global look at this and really challenged ourselves to think dynamically about what true DE&I is, including what it means to be allies. As I said before, we wanted to make sure that being where we're constructing this of mind here, we wanted to make sure that we're allies in other places where there might not be as many resources. And what kind of resources can we provide? So we went ahead about this. We went about this in a way where we said, how can we expand our thoughts, and how can we use this tool that we have to do that? A large part of that is including, and then Mike talked about this earlier, within the Alpha Omega project and the colleges and universities pilot that is currently being designed. The mentorship opportunities there, and interview skill opportunities, the outreach opportunities, looking at whether or not we can get institutions. I believe we want to start with at least 1 to 2 institutions to get this off the ground. But really targeting who can we partner with here, and then do we look at HBCUs? Do we look at other institutions and other Latin, predominantly Latin institutions, and where do we go and actually partner with organizations to get some of this stuff off the ground? So that stuff is extremely important as well. And what this allowed us to do, when you see that final bullet comment there, we constructed, and I can't wait to show this to any new people who actually join, and we'll talk about how you can join here in the next couple of slides. But we constructed this amazing spreadsheet, probably the first of its kind, when we put together this list, global list of organizations, partnership opportunities. We even are boiling it down to sponsorship, et cetera. So that's gives you an idea of how we went about our thought process, the things we've done thus far. And this next slide, let's talk about what we got coming up next. And Christine and I are both collab on this one. So next slide, please. Right, so what's next? As I said to you before, our 4 focal points. Those 4 focal points, they lend themselves to have a higher calling, so to speak. So one of the things that we have coming up next is perhaps lobbying for a centralized DE&I SIG, of which the education SIG falls underneath. And then we can expand that out now to outreach. We can take those other pillars, advocacy, communication, they could be their individual SIGs. So that gives the OpenSSF as a whole fuel to then reach, make the reach a little shorter into the LF, and how we build that bond and how we expand across to the other organizations. So you'll see that there. We do have in the Open Source Summit coming up. Christine and I will be hitting the stage once again to talk about our DE&I efforts. We'll be focusing on also outreach across the different security conferences as well. So you see, we got some big things coming up next. Christine will jump in on our partnership development and training and engagement opportunities.
Yeah, so as we kind of look, Jay mentioned, go back to the slide, when we're looking at some of the opportunities, we want to actually, beyond like Alpha and Omega as an example, we want to also reach out to the other OpenSSF working groups to see if there's any opportunities to collaborate with them. So that's one of the things that we want to look at. And there are existing Linux Foundation DE&I initiatives or programs such as LFX mentorship. Where can we go in and actually partner with them as well? And I started that the way we began this subcommittee was under the education SIG. So we want to go back with our learnings and go back and refine that plan so that we can include any of the work we're doing, especially things around partnerships. And as we think about what we want to do in the future, one of the things that is measuring the effectiveness of what we're trying to do in the education SIG and overall requires us to actually be very thoughtful about how we are resourcing the statistics, because a large number of folks that we need to reach may not be places where it's really actually easy to measure some of that work. So we want to look at our strategic partnerships who may already have that information. How can they actually provide ethical and accurate sources? So that's the risk if we actually do not do this work that we want to be really mindful of. So next slide. So Jay, you want to finish us off?
Yep. So you have here where you can come find us, where you can come join, where you can come be a part, see some of the great work that we're doing, and be part of that great work as well. We meet every other Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Our next meeting is March 28th. You can find us on Slack, at that Slack channel right there. Yeah, we got some big things coming, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much, Christine and Jay. This is incredibly important work. The work of the OpenSSF will only be successful if we can really broadly reach everybody involved in the software community and ecosystem. So your work is incredibly important. Thank you so much for this. And to bring us home, I wanted to get David Wheeler on the mic to talk with you all about how to get involved in the OpenSSF in our various working groups and projects. David, do you want to take it from here?
Absolutely. Next. So thanks very much for letting me talk next. So we've got a number of different working groups, and I'd like you to very much think about, gee, what could I be involved in? What's interesting? What do you find you could add value in? These show our various working groups, projects. I'm going to note them real quick. Best practices, identification, awareness, education, vulnerability disclosures. How do we improve vulnerability disclosures? End users working group, the voice of public and private sectors. We have a top-level project, SigStore. Identifying security threats is all about metrics, reviews, security tooling. We want to improve the state-of-art security tools, as mentioned earlier. That absolutely includes SBOMs. Securing our software repositories. Supply chain integrity includes both SALSA and S2C2F. Securing critical projects, trying to identify what are critical, how do we analyze them, and some associated projects, including, say, Alpha Omega. Next. So this is an attempt to show how our various projects and SIGs work together. And the real point here is there is no one silver bullet. And indeed, our projects span all the way from in developers' heads through source code management, building, packaging, handling dependencies, all the way out to end users. And so we basically have projects that go throughout all of those processes. Next. And so really what I want to emphasize in a very, very short time is we really want more participation. You know, if you're not already involved in the OpenSSF, please get involved. There's a lot of ways to get involved, listed a few here. We're going to talk about just a few in the next couple slides. But my point really is, if you're interested, come and talk, come and find out what's going on, and see if there's a, something that speaks to you. Next. So one obvious one is joining a technical working group. We have online meetings. Pretty much all the working groups meet every other week. You can join them by actually showing up at a meeting, or even just various other mechanisms that we'll talk about in a moment. But that's certainly a way to find out what's going on, see how you can help. Next. Attend a public meeting, like, say, this one. We love to have you here, love to have participation. Next. We use Slack for our real-time communications. This is not recorded forever, so this is not for major things that need to be recorded for posterity, but things like, hey, I've got a question. Where is this? Where is that? Please, we have a way to quickly answer those kinds of questions. Next. Following it, we've got a lot of different presences and various kinds of social media. We've got a couple links right here. Next. We have a number of mailing lists. Sign up. In particular, all the working groups have mailing lists. A number of these SIGs and projects have their own. Enables you to communicate and work in an async way. Next. And of course, hey, you can provide feedback on this very meeting right now we're having today. Fill the survey. How are we doing? How can we improve? Fundamentally, OpenSSF is all about collaboration. And so we really need to have everyone collaborating together to make the world a better place. Next.
Okay, thank you, David. And poor David, I told him to make sure that we left time for questions and answers at the end, but just do want to continue to emphasize how important it is to get involved and what the opportunities are. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask everybody to turn on their cameras if they can, hopefully you can, let's see, turn mine on. There we go. I'd like to go through some of the questions that have been asked, but actually I want to start with some that were kind of answered and taken off the Q&A thing, because there was one that seemed to be pretty important from Tad Taylor. Are there particular projects or areas that are more in need of volunteers' help than others? Now, I feel like every project under OpenSSF could use more. I don't think there's any who are like, whoa, too many volunteers, no more needed. If you ever get a sense that it's maybe hard to figure out where that locus of activity is, definitely tell us, tell me personally, because what we're really trying to be is as transparent about where the community activities are and that kind of thing. We know that sometimes a Zoom-centered culture can make it hard for people to participate, but we really try to emphasize, get things done over async tools, that kind of thing. But well, the one I would love to draw some attention to is the security scorecard effort. We would love to see more folks participate in that. It's writing code, helping us move that along. They've got a really ambitious roadmap for this year, and we've got some resources to help do some work on that. But that's a place where some volunteer time would be incredibly high leverage. Does anyone else on the group want to throw out their favorite call for help from some part of the OpenSSF?
It's a lot like asking us to pick our children, our favorite
I know
child.
every one of them could use some help. I think the most important thing is find something that really interests you, become a user of that code, a consumer of it, get to understand it well, and that'll just naturally happen. You'll find bugs, you'll find things to add, get to know folks. But I really appreciate the broad-based kind of like query of where somebody with some time could be able to help us further in the mission. And if you're not quite sure, find a working group that is like in a domain you're interested in, because that might be one way of understanding the different things going on under that working group, and then get more specific as you learn more. There was anybody else want to add anything to that? Okay, and I'll make another plug for the DEI effort as well. That's one that also could use lots of voices, lots of help from people to get involved. There was another question that got answered very quickly and moved on. I want to just bring up, which is I feel obligated to mention it this week, which is from Christoph Pup. Will AI be used for the industrialization of vulnerability hunting in FOSS? Ask ChatGPT for all, I think it's SQL injections in projects. Michael Scavetta, I think I'll pass that one to you. Where do you see ChatGPT potentially making it possible to find security holes more quickly? And is there a role for that at the OpenSSF?
I think that AI and ML, especially emerging GPT-3, GPT-4, will make both defenders and attackers better. So if defenders don't get on board and use AI to make better decisions and find things better, cheaper, faster, attackers are going to. So it's inevitable that we're going to go there. I don't know if it's just incremental, like if we're going to have a decade or two of antivirus cat and mouse. Maybe we'll see, but we all need to be very cognizant of it. I know that AI is being used in some places to, essentially ferret out false positives and do better prioritization and things like that. I think that there's 1,000 times more that we could do with AI. The next couple of years are going to be interesting.
Thanks, Michael. David, do you have a comment on this or a thought on this?
Yeah, first of all, I do agree with Michael that I think it's like many other tools, it's an accelerant. It can be used by both defenders and attackers. So defenders need to take advantage of the technologies where it makes sense. We're still trying to figure out where it makes it's useful and where it's not. I mean, GPT-4 is just recently come out officially at least. That said, we are always interested in improvements and so on. The good news is that, from the point of view of, hey, once the code, if code doesn't have vulnerabilities, they can't be, an attacker can't create vulnerabilities that don't exist. So I think there is room for hope longer term here. And we're still trying to figure out exactly where these technologies come into play.
Yeah, and inside the OpenSSF, I think this is the kind of thing that might merit its own working group at some point. or at least a dedicated kind of group to focus on, because I don't know where it would live right now under our current kind of hierarchy. Let's move on. I want to ask one from the current open queue from Gil Yehuda, which is, Gil says, long ago the stack was represented by 4 letters, LAMP. Today, dependency trees are in the thousands. CVEs are published at an increasing rate, but researchers note that most are not event exploitable. That suggests we're heading towards a scalability failure. What can the OpenSSF do to address the volume of work so that we can address security in more efficient ways, such as through bulk categories? And I'm not sure what he means by bulk categories, but I'm thinking this might be something that Christine, Jay, or Josh might have some insight on. Do one of the 3 of you want to jump for this?
I can, I mean, I'll add a comment. It's just that there's vulnerabilities. I think there's a couple of vulnerabilities working groups. Crow heads them up. Go talk to those folks. Like, they're the ones who are talking about this stuff, and they probably have the most insight of anybody.
Yeah, well, I think really that part answering this question is part of the story of the OpenSSF. I think it's through a combination of tools like Salsa and S2C2F that we get to a sort of process implementation and conformance. It's through SigStore and that we sign artifacts through this and can systematically check their veracity without having to recompile the world from scratch. It's through things like SBOMs that and increasingly technologies like Vex that will help us drive automation around handling of those CVs at scale to hopefully get to the point where enterprises can have a dashboard each morning that gives them only the things that they have to worry about and not try to boil the ocean by updating every component every day. Is kind of my take. And Jay, I don't know if you wanted to throw in anything about S2C2F and Salsa in there as perhaps ways to help address that. I'm putting you on the spot.
So, the beauty of partnership and collaboration. So we, bringing in S2C2F and thinking about dependency management also, the evolution of Salsa from its inception, its initiation, incubation, into what it's become to now, where there's actually thought around the build portions and the source portions, and then where all of that can come. It just creates a situation where we can now think about end-to-end supply chain security. And this is a caveat to what Brian's just said. When we consider the tools that are available out there and the tools that are available in the open out there, and those tools that we can then in concept think about in their application implementation into these frameworks and the work efforts, there is no place that we can't go considering how we address supply chain security problems. And we're doing that as a community, which is always amazing to see, amazing to witness. We got bumps and bruises, right, as every community does. But as we march forward hand in hand, and the innovation that gets created as a result can only be looked at in awe. So that's when we think about S2C2F and Salsa, also think about that's not the finish line. That's still the beginning.
Very much so. Okay, I'm trying to look through the other questions here. And I want to add one from, there's a couple of clarifications just for where folks can go to contribute, where some of the conversations are happening. And again, the list of links that are in this deck will be kind of your guide to where to get started on this. I think this is actually, since we're in the last minute, a good time to wrap up. I want to thank my panelists for the presentations and for the participation in the conversation. I want to thank all of you who've given us an hour of your day to learn more about the OpenSSF and where we're headed. And I hope we've given you a taste of what's going on. Certainly it's not everything. That would take about 6 or 8 hours of webinar to go through. There's a lot more here beyond even those things that we've barely been able to touch on. So really, if you're interested in this topic at all, come and visit us on Slack, get to know us in the different working groups, and we will find a way to put you to work if you've got the time and the talent. Again, just want to thank everybody involved in putting this together, and we will see you at the next town hall, if not sooner. Thanks, everyone.